I do everything in my power to prevent hospitalisation.
I think that experience for her was absolutely frightening. Even if she knew where she was frightened because she thought her life was coming to an end, basically.
All she could say to me was, "Don't let them kill me, Charlie, don't let them kill me, don't let me die."
Delirium is probably more common than I even know, and I would be happy to admit that delirium is often hard to diagnose.
A delirium is a medical emergency. We don't actually know exactly what's happening in the brain, but clearly there are major things going wrong. It stops the brain functioning. People die from delirium. It's a very dangerous condition to have.
My life with Joan. 60 years it was. I had the best wife you could have had.
My twin sister Maud was like me in some ways and she was very different in other ways. We were very, very close to one another. She looked after the garden. We knew she was getting older and that her mind was wandering a bit. I think I just treated it as something that was inevitable.
People often come in thinking that dementia is inevitable the older they get. Certainly that's not my experience. I have numbers of very able-bodied and able-minded patients in their 90s and 100s who are driving and functional in the community in a very real way. So for me, ageing and dementia don't necessarily go hand in hand.
She was aware there was something wrong with her. All of a sudden, the things that we thought may have been wrong or were going to be wrong, were wrong. And that put an entirely different outlook on everything with her.
I remember when Mum was about 75 and she started forgetting things and repeating herself, and this was continually noticeable, and as the years were progressing, we realised that something wasn't terribly right.
It took the family a fairly long time to come to the point of really finding out what really was wrong with her. We all had suspicions of this and suspicions of that.
My twin sister Maud was like me in some ways and she was very different in other ways. She was perhaps a bit more moody than I was. The fact that we were identical twins played in our hands. We were very, very close to one another. Each of us did what the other one did, and we very rarely had disagreements. I'm getting older now. I stop and try to think what she was like and what I was like years ago, and it's quite hard to go back.
Mum was into her 80s. Auntie Maud was into her 80s when they moved into this house, and Mum pretty much had the sole care of Auntie Maud. And it got more difficult as time went on.
Maudie was in patch theatre. She'd always been interested in that kind of thing. To my mind, she was a really good actress. Maudie had no children, she didn't marry. She helped me a lot with my children.
It was sort of like a second mum, I guess, that she was, obviously they're identical twins, very similar, but it was, she was a very interesting person. I think that's the thing that I remember most. She would do the types of things that a lot of people do, like for example, walk to the laundry and said, I knew that I had to be out here for something, but I just can't remember what it was. And for a long time, I guess you'd say that she was like the dotty aunt, very much beloved dotty aunt. A little bit forgetful. She would perhaps confuse people from earlier in her life with people in her current life. She would forget words. Before the rapid decline, there was a lot of anger. And a lot of anger, I think, was directed towards Mum because she perceived that Mum wasn't letting her do anything and was not bullying her, but not letting her do anything. And I think that's very difficult because Mum was doing obviously the right thing and not wanting her to be harmed. There was a lot of frustration in that she couldn't do the things that she wanted to do previously. And there was a lot of frustration in that she couldn't do her writing. She knew what she wanted to do, so she would say, I've got 3 stories and I want to get these stories rewritten so that I can submit them to the writing magazine. But she just couldn't get from A to B. The lack of concentration, lack of application to a task, to see a task from beginning to the end.
She was a better gardener than me. She looked after the garden. She's been sort of the one that's been in charge.
Mum would say there's something wrong. She's getting worse. She's doing funny things, and because if you're not there all the time, you don't see it. And when I saw her most of the time, she was fine. So it was very hard to believe that there was actually anything wrong. But I think the thing that brought it home to me was that we had a family Christmas down at my place, and Auntie Maud came to me and said, look, I'm really, really angry. Mum won't let me do anything around the house. She won't let me help in the kitchen. She won't let me do any of the housework. I'm not allowed to do anything anymore. And I felt really sorry because I hadn't seen much of a decline. I said, look, come and help me in the kitchen. And we potted around in the kitchen for a little while. And then I said to her, do you think you could take the sausage rolls out of the oven and put them on this platter? Well, she was going to go and get them out of the oven without any protection on her hands. She was just going to get them, and I managed to stop her, but that really shocked me.